The night my brother told me to get out, he said it the way you'd tell a dog to move off the couch. Not angry, not even looking at me, just flat, like the decision had been made long ago, and he was only now bothering to inform me. It was 11:30 on a Tuesday in February. Outside, it was -18 with the wind chill. I know because I checked my phone the moment I stepped onto the porch, the way you instinctively reach for something solid when the ground disappears under you. I had 2 bags. One was a proper duffel I'd packed myself. The other was a blue IKEA bag my brother had filled by walking through the spare room and sweeping things off the shelf with his forearm. My shampoo, a framed photo of my mother, the small succulent I'd kept alive for 3 years, all of it together like it meant nothing, because to him it didn't. You have until tomorrow morning to figure out your storage situation, he said from the doorway. He was wearing a fleece vest. His wife was somewhere behind him in the kitchen, very quiet in the way people are quiet when they're listening hard. I didn't argue. I had learned a long time ago that arguing with my brother was like trying to return something without a receipt. He would hear every word you said and still send you away empty-handed. I walked to my car, threw both bags in the back seat, and sat in the driveway for 4 minutes trying to decide what a person does at 11:30 at night in a Canadian February when they have no place to go. Then I remembered the property. My parents had died 14 months apart, my father from a stroke, my mother from what I can only describe as the specific exhaustion of outliving the person you built your life around. They had left behind 2 things of significance. The first was a condo in Oakville that my brother, whose name is Marcus, had moved into within 6 weeks of our mother's funeral. The second was a piece of commercial property in Hamilton, a small industrial unit, maybe 4,000 square feet, in an area that used to be manufacturing and was now mostly empty lots and a discount mattress warehouse. Marcus had been very clear about the division. He was the eldest. He had managed our parents' finances in their final years. The condo was worth something. The Hamilton property, he explained to me, with the patient condescension of someone explaining a parking ticket, was a liability. Property taxes, maintenance, the roof had issues. He was doing me a favor, he said, letting me take it off the estate's hands. I had signed what I was told to sign. I was 29 at the time and working as a bookkeeper for a small construction firm in Mississauga, and I did not have a lawyer, and I did not think to get one, and I trusted my brother the way you trust a staircase. You don't think about it, you just step. For 14 months, I had been living in the spare room of Marcus's condo, paying what he called a contribution to household costs, $800 a month, which was $200 less than a bachelor apartment in the area, but came with the understanding that I was available to help with groceries, his daughter's school pickups, and whatever else presented itself. His wife, Renata, referred to this arrangement to her friends as having a live-in. She did not mean it unkindly. That was somehow worse. I had been saving. Not fast enough, but saving. I had a number in my head first and last on a 1-bedroom, and I was 3 months away from it. Then Marcus and Renata decided to convert the spare room into a home office, and I was told about it the same way I was told about most things in that house, after the decision was already made. So that was how I ended up in my 2019 Civic in a February wind chill, driving 45 minutes down the QEW toward a property I had never once visited, because it was the only thing in my name that had 4 walls and a roof. I found the address through the property tax notice I'd been filing. The building sat on a side street off Barton, between a muffler shop and a vacant lot that had a hand-painted sign, advertising it as future site of something that clearly had not yet materialized. The unit itself looked like it had been used for light manufacturing at some point, a roll-up garage door, 2 regular doors, aluminum siding that had gone from whatever color it started as to a uniform gray, a padlock on the side entrance that matched the key on my ring. I sat in the parking lot for a while with the heat running. The building looked abandoned. It probably was abandoned. Marcus had been handling the utilities on the estate properties, and I had simply assumed, when he handed me the key 2 years ago at the lawyer's office, that there was nothing inside worth thinking about. I tried the padlock. It opened. The side door stuck, swollen from cold and probably years of not being used, and I had to put my shoulder into it. When it gave, a smell came out, not rot, not mold, just sealed air and something underneath it I couldn't name, like the inside of an old glove. I found the breaker panel just inside the door and flipped the main. A few fluorescent tubes flickered on in the front section of the building. One stayed dark. The front section was empty, bare concrete floor, a folding table against one wall, a shelf unit with some empty cardboard boxes, the kind of emptiness that had settled in like furniture. But the building went back further than it looked from the outside. There was a second section, and between the 2 sections was a wall. I almost didn't think about the wall. It was drywall, painted the same institutional beige as everything else, and it had a door frame in it, with an actual door hollow core, the kind you buy at a hardware store, and a padlock on a hasp that matched the second key on my ring. The key I had always assumed was a duplicate. It wasn't a duplicate. I stood in that cold building at 12:40 in the morning, and I thought about my brother telling me I had until tomorrow to figure out my storage situation. I thought about Renata's voice, very quiet, behind him in the kitchen. I thought about $800 a month for 14 months and 3 years of school pickups. Then I unlocked the door. I want to tell you what I saw when I turned on the light in that back section, but I need you to understand something first about what I was expecting. I was expecting old equipment, pallets, maybe some leftover inventory from whatever business my father had run out of this space, because I had found, in the paperwork after his death, references to a numbered company I didn't fully understand. I was expecting something I would have to pay someone to haul away. What I saw instead was cars. 7 of them, arranged in 2 rows, covered in cotton car covers that had gone slightly gray with dust. The covers were fitted not just tarps thrown over, but shaped covers that followed the lines of the vehicles underneath. Someone had put these here carefully. Someone had thought about it. I walked to the nearest one and lifted the corner of the cover. The car underneath was a deep burgundy, almost brown in the fluorescent light. I didn't know what it was. I am a bookkeeper, not a car person. But I could see that it was old, and I could see from the shape of it that old in this case did not mean worthless. It had lines that nothing current has, the kind of weight to it that you feel before you even touch it. I pulled the cover all the way off and stood back. It was a 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback. I know that now. I did not know it that night. I uncovered all 7 cars in that room. It took 40 minutes. I was shaking by the time I finished, not from cold, though the cold was real enough, but from something I did not yet have a name for. It was the feeling of standing on ground you thought was one thing, and discovering it as something else entirely. My father had collected cars, quietly, privately, the way some men have a whole life running parallel to the one their family sees. I went back to my Civic, turned the heat to maximum, and started making calls. The first call was to my uncle, my father's younger brother, who had worked in insurance most of his career and who I had always liked in the mild, uncomplicated way you like people who have never done anything to hurt you. He answered on the 4th ring, groggy, and I apologized for the hour and then told him what I had found. There was a long pause. "Your father talked about those cars," he said. I didn't know he'd actually kept them all. "Did you know about this property?" Another pause. He mentioned a storage situation, years ago. I didn't ask details. Were they worth anything? My uncle was quiet for a moment in a way that told me he knew more than he was saying. "I think you should call a professional appraiser before you call anyone else," he said carefully. "And I think you should do it before you tell your brother." I understood what he meant. I thanked him and ended the call. Then I sat in the parking lot until 4 in the morning doing research on my phone, and by the time the sky started going gray, I had stopped shaking and started thinking clearly. The thing about working as a bookkeeper is that you become very comfortable with the distance between what something appears to be worth and what it actually is. You learn to look at numbers without feeling, to follow a line of figures to where it actually ends rather than where someone tells you it ends. I applied that to the cars. I spent 3 days not telling Marcus anything. I went to work. I slept in the building. I had an air mattress in my duffel, bought years ago for camping, and I set it up in the front section and layered every piece of clothing I owned and told myself it was temporary. I told myself a lot of things that week. I contacted 3 appraisers. I found them through a classic car club forum and a referral from my uncle, and I was careful to be vague in my initial emails about what exactly I had. The first one who came was a man in his 60s from Burlington, who walked through the back section for 20 minutes without saying a word, and then turned to me with an expression I couldn't read, and asked me if I knew the provenance on the Mustang Fastback. I said I didn't. He showed me something on his phone, a registry, numbers that matched the placard on the car. "This is a documented 1967 Shelby GT 500, he said. "There are fewer than 2,000 known to exist." I kept my face neutral the way you do when a column of numbers comes out different than expected, and you need to check your work before you react. "And the others?" I asked. He walked me through all 7. A 1969 Camaro Z28. A 1970 Plymouth Cuda convertible. He said the word convertible with particular emphasis, and I wrote it down. A 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air, in what he called survivor condition. 2 others I have since learned were significant, and one, a 1971 Ford Maverick, that he described as a good driver, but not a collector piece. When he finished, he sat down on a folding chair and did some calculations on his phone and showed me a number. I looked at it for a long time. "Is that conservative?" I asked. "That's conservative," he said. I called a lawyer before I called anyone else. A real one, not the notary who had handled the estate, but a lawyer who specialized in estate and property disputes, whose name I found through the Law Society of Ontario's referral service. I explained the situation. I sent her the property documents, the estate papers I had signed, and the appraiser's preliminary report. She called me back the next day. The property transfer was valid, she said, but I want you to look at something. She walked me through a clause in the estate agreement related to contents. My brother had taken the condo. I had taken the property. The agreement listed the condo contents as included in the transfer. The property, by the same structure, transferred with its contents. Did your brother know what was in the building? She asked. I don't know, I said. I'd like you to think carefully about that before you answer. I thought about it. I thought about my father's numbered company. I thought about the property tax notices that had always gone directly to Marcus, who managed the estate finances, before being forwarded to me. I thought about the fact that there were 2 keys on the ring the lawyer handed me at the estate meeting, and Marcus had been in that meeting, and he had never once mentioned a second section of the building. I think he may have known there was something there, I said. I don't think he knew what it was. That's an important distinction, she said. She told me to document everything. Photographs, the appraiser's report, the property records. She told me not to contact Marcus yet. I did exactly what she said. The auction took place in May, 4 months after the night I drove to Hamilton with nowhere else to go. I worked with a specialist auction house in Toronto, not Sotheby's, but a Canadian house with a strong collector car division, and we agreed to offer 5 of the 7 vehicles. I kept the Bel Air and the Maverick, the 2 my appraiser had called the most personally drivable, which felt like a practical decision, and also felt like something my father would have understood. I did not tell Marcus until 2 weeks before the auction, when my lawyer advised that I was legally required to notify him as a co-executor of the estate that a significant asset was being liquidated. She drafted the letter. It was precise and thorough and contained no emotional language whatsoever, which I appreciated. He called me 20 minutes after receiving it. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let that go too. He texted, "We need to talk about this. Call me." I showed the text to my lawyer. She said I was not obligated to speak to him directly and that all communication could go through her office. I said that was fine with me. He texted 4 more times over the following 3 days. The text went from demanding to confused to, finally, a version of conciliatory that I recognized from childhood, the tone he used when he wanted something and had run out of other options. He said there had been a misunderstanding. He said he hadn't realized the extent of what was in the building. He said the estate should be revisited. My lawyer responded on my behalf. The property had transferred legally and completely. The contents were mine. The auction would proceed. The Shelby GT 500 sold for $480,000. The Plymouth Cuda convertible sold for $310,000. The Camaro brought $190,000. The 2 others together brought just under $300,000. I sat in the auction room in a blazer I had bought at a consignment shop in Westdale for $60, and I watched the numbers go up on the screen, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time, which was that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Total proceeds from the 5 vehicles, after auction house fees and taxes, just under $1.1 million. Here is what I did with it, because I know that is what you want to know. The first thing I did was pay my uncle back. Not because he had given me money he hadn't, but because when I was sleeping on an air mattress in a concrete building in February, he had talked me through 3 phone calls without asking me for anything, and I sent him enough for a trip he had been talking about taking for years and never quite managed. He tried to refuse it. I told him my father would have wanted him to go. The second thing I did was retain my lawyer on an ongoing basis, which turned out to be useful when Marcus filed a challenge to the estate asset transfer. The challenge did not succeed. It cost him more in legal fees than it would have to simply accept what had happened, which I think is a very accurate summary of my brother as a person. The third thing I did was buy a small condo in Hamilton, 2 kilometers from the industrial unit, in a neighborhood that is in the early stages of becoming something. I pay my own costs. My name is the only one on the title. And the fourth thing, the one that took the most thought, was that I used a portion of the remaining funds to buy into a small bookkeeping and financial services firm in Hamilton whose owner was looking for a partner. I had been an employee my entire working life. I knew the work. I knew the numbers. What I had not known until that February night was that I was also someone who could make a decision alone in a cold building at midnight and follow it all the way through. I know that now. Marcus and I do not speak. I used to think about whether that was sad, and I have mostly stopped thinking about it. There is a version of this story where I feel guilty, where I second-guess the choices I made, where I wonder if I should have called him sooner or split the proceeds or handled it differently. I have visited that version. I did not stay. What I kept coming back to, in the months after, was something my uncle said to me on one of those late-night phone calls. He said my father had always been more complicated than either of his children knew, and that sometimes the things people leave behind are not what they seem to be leaving. I think about the cotton car covers, how fitted they were, how someone had thought about the preservation, the long term, The possibility that someone would come along eventually and lift the edge and see what was underneath. I think my father knew it would be me. I can't prove that, but I think it. I sleep well now. The condo has good windows and I keep them open when the weather allows, and on clear mornings I can see the escarpment from the kitchen. I drive the Bel Air on weekends when the roads are dry. I don't know much about cars, but I am learning. That feels like the right place to end up.